Hi, welcome to the Heidi Show. My name is Heidi Truog, and we're here to explore metaphysical and holistic concepts. And today we have a numerologist on, and the two of us are going to be discussing the birth charts of Missoula. And yes, it does have a birth chart. And we'll be talking about what we can expect through the year here in Missoula, and it should be pretty interesting. Before we get to that, I wanted to do the astrology for this week coming up. And talking about right at this moment, we have the sun in Aries and we have the moon in Sagittarius, so very high energy. I would recommend people continue to wear their seat belts and use their harnesses in any activities they're doing, because it is a risk-taking time. We're very enthused and filled with this energy, and possibly bolder than we need to be. So use a little caution in all your high energy risk-taking adventures, and do have a lot of fun. And I also want to talk about the transition we just went through. We came out of Pisces and we went into Aries as far as the sun sign goes. And Pisces has a lot of quality of the dream time. It's very inward, sort of like hibernating, like the bear. So it's sort of like the bear coming out and sniffing all the flowers and get all of the senses coming alive and wanting to be very active and searching for berries and honey and people's garbage and all this other stuff. So it's a very different energy. It's very active, and it's been an abrupt change for quite a few people. The switch between the dream time and being out there and going for what you want and being driven. And it can be, like I said, an abrupt change to the sensibilities, and give yourself some time. And even though it's Aries right now, we can still take time to breathe and get our bearings. It's the start of a very dynamic year. And I was on a really great website this weekend, and it actually is the website of one of our camera crew, Nan Cohen. And on there I read that March 26th, today, is an evolutionary jump time. The possibility for increasing our vibration right now is really strong, and I recommend that everybody take advantage of it if they can. And I think that's all I want to talk about right now for astrology for the week. I want to introduce David Trotter, a local numerologist who works through the Feng Shui Center, and I'll be giving out phone numbers later. And it's a real treat to have you here.
Thank you.
David, again, is extremely local talent. He is one of our directors and very talented, and he knows all about the numbers. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. You were talking about, just a moment ago, about Aries and it being a bold time, and going out and grabbing what you've been picturing in the dream time.
Right.
That's an interesting corollary to the numerology chart, because as I said a couple weeks ago in a brief bit that we did on numerology, as of the 8th of this month, 8th of March, we moved into a number 4 year with Missoula. And all what that means is that this is a good year for putting ideas that have been bubbling in our on the back burners or in our minds as a city into form and giving them structure. But you also mentioned mentioned the dream time.
Right.
Numerologically, this first month from March 8th through April 7th is primarily a reflection, spirit time, dream time type month, a time to sit back and think about what it is we're really trying to accomplish, what we're trying to put into effect. Because this first month, if we go out and try to force anything to happen, try to make anything happen, we'll be pushing it away more than rather than giving it a chance to occur. It's a strictly spiritual influence. So
would it be true that people who live in Missoula would find this a little bit more of an awkward period than if we were in another part of Montana? You know, because we're sort of between the action and the dream time?
Very definitely.
Because it feels sort of awkward. It's like...
It is an awkward time, because, numerologically speaking, because the whole year is a very structured, formalistic, even in some ways rule-bound type existence. As a matter of fact, one of the things we need to remember so that we don't get too rigid this year as a city is to kick back once in a while, have a little fun, because the dark side, one part of the dark side of this year is to become too rigid and forget about having fun. But at the same time, this month is not that, is totally the opposite of that. It's an internal spiritual working. So the two are at tension with each other at the very best. Some would say conflict. I tend to use the word tension because tension always implies to me a creative possibility.
So we could recreate the rules.
This would be a good time to do it. Recreate
Okay.
it. Recreate first in our minds.
Okay, which was where everything basically starts.
Yes.
And now, is numerology, do you use the 0? Are there 10 years in a cycle or 9 years in a cycle?
I use 9 years in a cycle.
Okay. So when was the last time we were at a 4? That would be 9 years ago?
That would have been 9 years ago. So what is this? Is 2000? So 1991. 91, yes.
Okay. So 91 was the last time we were in a 4.
In this much of a structuring cycle, yes.
Okay. And I wasn't living in Montana at that time.
Neither was I.
So those of you who are native to Missoula, you might be able to remember what was going on at that time. We did have a changeover nationally. Clinton went into.
Well, and I came here in 1996 and was told at that time and over the next year that Missoula at that time was very different than it had been 4 or 5 years ago, which would put us right back to 1991.
Okay.
So apparently there was something that happened at that point. New ideas were given form. I wasn't here to know how that took place, but apparently that was part of what happened 9 years ago in Missoula. And we have that kind of opportunity again to give a new structure to things.
And I have to backtrack. Clinton did not get into office till he was elected in '92, so I just want to change that. But yeah, actually, we'd like to get any feedback people have about that period. That would be very interesting. And we'll probably have more information about this as the year goes on, and possibly articles about it and things like that.
Yeah.
So any feedback is most welcome. And again, we'll have the numbers at the end of the show for people to call in. Now, I'm going to extrapolate this into astrology a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
For me is the number of manifestation. You said structure and rules and
Essentially the same things in some ways, although there is a manifestation element in 8 also, which is next month.
Which is next month. Okay.
Yes.
So actually, the way I learned it is the cube of knowledge.
Mm-hmm. That would coincide with what goes on numerologically.
Okay.
It's not something that I specifically look at, but that is there.
So it would be really being sure about our foundations, that they are what we really want to build upon.
Well, foundations is one of the aspects of a number 4 that I stress when doing both a tarot reading, because I bring in the numerology, and a numerological chart, because 4 is about building.
Okay.
Building structures, whether it's governmental structures, and government is extremely well tied to the number 4, as is business. Okay. So this is a good governmental restructuring and business restructuring year for Missoula numerologically, but you need firm foundations on that to begin this with. We actually lay the foundations now so that we can go into the freedom of next year, of the following year, and the social structuring of the following year. We lay the governmental, the business, and the infrastructure, oddly enough, foundations now as a city. Whether we do it rightly or wrongly, whatever we do now will carry us for a long time.
And I think maybe we should backtrack.
Yes.
And I'm going to ask you about the birth chart of Missoula.
Okay.
What is the personality of Missoula? What makes it different from any other city?
Well, Missoula is I do city birth chart differently than I do a personal birth chart, because in the personal birth chart I will take simply the full name. Mm-hmm. That will give me a soul urge, which is what drives the person from a deeper soul level, sometimes not necessarily a conscious level, a subconscious, a superconscious level. And then I'll find an ego number, which is how they express themselves to the world. It's the outward personality that we perceive in a person. It's it's sometimes even what the person themselves buys into. They may see themselves as very aggressive or leadership oriented, when that's not really what their true personality is. I get the true personality by looking at the soul urge number, and by taking the two numbers added together for an overall picture. And I
Okay.
do the same thing with a city. But with a city, I have to look at it two ways. I have to look at just Missoula
Okay.
as a city, as an entity unto itself, and I have to look at Missoula, Montana as the whole entity.
An entity within an entity.
Yes.
Okay.
And as the entity within an entity, Missoula just by itself, its motivational number, its soul urge, is a 1, which basically tells me that it's driven to be the vision, to lead in a visionary way,
Okay.
to create new ways of thinking, even new forms, to see the different way. I often compare this kind of leadership to that of Martin Luther King or Gandhi, that kind of visionary saying, no, this is the way we need to go.
Okay.
At the same time, it has its ego is total altruistic service, selfless service. Now there's an inherent problem in this, which shows up more prominently in individual people but can show up as a city. There's a point where we as a city, looking at how do we influence the state, government, the world around us, can give to the point where we forget about taking care of our own needs.
Right. There's no return on the energy.
No, there's no return on the energy. It's a hermitic energy. This is why the hermit is number 9 in the tarot deck, which is what this energy is. The hermit sometimes withdraws into himself or herself, simply to regroup and let their energy flow back into the world.
Okay.
It's not a reclusive energy, but it's withdrawing in order to serve. That's the ego nature of Missoula. What happens is that this leadership, initiating, inventing a new wheel or something better than the wheel, is at conflict with the more loving, caring, nurturing energy of the total altruistic servant. How the two come together for Missoula as an entity by itself is ultimately to be a leader, to be the visionary, inventive, innovative leader.
And I have to ask you again, which is which? Which is the underlying soul and which is the personality?
The leadership, the innovation, the visionary is the underlying personality.
Soul drive.
And because of the way the numbers fall, it also comes out to the overall, the true nature of the city. But the ego, what we present to the world, is this altruistic servant nature.
And now I'm going to bring up the shadow side of this. So what I see as part of the shadow, it's giving, caring, but underneath it all, we're very people who move here, who would be matching this energy, very individualistic.
Yes.
And
That's
possibly self-serving and having more of an illusionary facade. That would be, to me, the dark shadow side.
The other aspect, and it can be developed and very positive or very undeveloped, and backlash, dark side, negative, is that leadership is the individualism that you mentioned.
Right.
It's number 1 is also the individualism of the magician.
Okay.
I think it, therefore it is. As above, so below. And I think it has to be so, and that's involved in that leadership quality, that individualistic quality. What's interesting is that when we take Missoula, Montana, the whole picture, that servant quality moves into the underlying, to the motivational underlying personality position, and and is replaced in the ego position as with a very spiritual number, the number 7 that we're dealing with right now this month.
Okay.
That reflective, that metaphysical, that mystical element, that element of the unknown, and you cannot know it until you get there. No matter how much you want to know the outcome beforehand, you're not going to. That's Missoula overall, as Missoula, Montana, which the two combine again then to make us overall a very spiritual, a very metaphysical, a very occult ordered city. And if this program is an example, you see a lot of that in town, and more churches per capita than a lot of places. The spiritual element, the mystical element is here.
Right. And the reason I brought up the dark side is because I don't believe it just goes away. And the best way to deal with it is to face it. And you are also a political activist, and I know I can ask you this question and get a pretty
Yes.
accurate answer. How many not-for-profits do we have in this town?
The estimate is approximately 2,200.
Okay, and we have, is it about 70 or 80,000 people?
I thought I would understand about 60, but it's
60.
still.
So we have a lot of people doing these not-for-profits, 2,200. I mean, it's just huge.
Yes.
So this is part of what I'm trying to get at. People have all this altruistic,
Yes.
very well-intentioned motivation
Yes.
and push, but underneath it there is a bit of a tension with joining forces with other people.
Well, the individualism that comes through in the numerology chart is very much at tension with the serving element within this city. Everybody has, this city of Missoula has more reason with all the nonprofits and all the spiritual activity to join those forces, as you said,
Right.
and work together, and yet we don't. And much of the much of the factoring behind that I've noticed is that everybody wants to own their own projects.
Right.
We have a number of spiritual people, metaphysical workers, light workers in the city who are interested in building community. And yet everybody wants to build, has their own vision of what that community is, and wants to build their own community and bring all the other light workers in it. We're beginning to see a coming together, and this has happened, this is that formation again that is involved in this year, putting ideas into form. We're seeing some of the bridges being gapped, some of the walls coming down in small enclaves of spirit workers, in small enclaves of environmentalists, and small enclaves of social justice activists. But there's still a tendency to want to own the projects, or for an individual, because of their position in government, to want to own the process and be the one who bridges the gaps rather than letting others take the lead. Everybody wants to own it.
And there's nothing wrong with having a personal vision.
No.
And trying to make it happen.
That's what keeps this city alive in many ways.
Yeah. But working with people is a bit of our challenge.
Yes.
And a slight dose of abandonment and surrender might be in order. And surrendering that everything is going towards the larger good anyway, rather than holding the reins all the time.
One of the ways to do that is to look at what we're doing next month and in the following month, numerologically.
Okay.
In other words, from April 8th through May 7th, and from May 8th through June 7th, numerologically. Because particularly in April we get into the mastership and learning from our mistakes elements.
Oh, what fun.
And we as a city, we all make mistakes. Cities make them too. Families make them. We're like a very large family here.
Right. Yeah, it's a pretty amazing community. And I recently went to a large gathering of people to try to keep a local community center open.
Yes.
And I was just amazed at the variety of people and the hopefulness and just the beautiful energy that was there. It was about, I think, 60 people. And
I actually had intended to be there, but had dual bookings that morning, and it turned out that being in my own spiritual community was where I needed to be that morning.
Yeah. Well, just to let you know, it was an amazing group of people, and the altruism was really evident. And I did want to get into that part. Is Missoula ever going to get into the complete cycle of exchange of energies? Do we have anything available this year to us numerologically that will help see that cycle return? I mean, this place is notorious for low wages and exceedingly low wages. If we compare it nationally, it's just like half.
You mentioned my social activism. There are probably people who will see the show who will say, "Oh no, he's yes."
So and I noticed that too when I was at this meeting. People are more than willing to give away all of their talents and all of their time, and not expecting a return of that energy. Possibly figuring that it would eventually come, that Spirit would take care of that, but not taking personal responsibility for the return of energy. And I'm wondering if anything is going to open up this year that's going to bring that to the fore.
One of the things that we do have, and what I'm doing is I'm just flipping through to get our, look at the quarters here.
Okay.
Because, as I said, this is a structuring year, number 4 year, but within that you have 3-month blocks that are also can be figured out numerologically, and that giving it a solid foundation, particularly in the first 3 months from March 8th through July 7th, is important. But then we move into a number 6.
Okay, what is 6?
6 is social order, social responsibility.
Okay.
It is probably the 6 is probably the most nurturing number, nurturing vibration of the entire numerological chart, even more than the Hermetic energy of the 9. 6 is the element is mothering energy.
Okay.
But there is a tendency within that kind of nurturing parenting energy to become paternalistic at times, and to say, well, we know what's best for you, whether you realize what's best for you or not, and this is the way it's going to be because it's good for you. Because it's good for you. And that's what mothers will do sometime. I lived in a household with a 53-year-old woman who treated her 20-year-old children and foster children that way and tried to treat me in my 40s that way.
But it's all coming out of love.
And it's coming out of love, but it's coming out of an ego-centered love that's really very selfish, that says, I know what's best for you. It forgets the other aspect of nurturing, which is to let people develop their own lifestyles, to let people develop their own way of doing things. The positive, highly developed energy aspect of that energy, and we need to look at this from July through October, into October especially, is to realize that there's a time you have to let your children go.
And so how would you see this as a municipality? Is the government holding us too much in their hands? Are they taking...
To an extent, to a great extent, yes. Okay. And we see that in how we deal with the poor in this. There's a tendency in this, both in the government and in many of the service organizations, and we do have a couple of shelters here, with this, who come out of the same board of directors. There's a tendency to be paternalistic at times and to say, we know what's best for you, this is how it needs to be done. There's a tendency to say, let's feed the poor and not worry about transportation, or not worry about outreach to single teenage fathers, because they shouldn't be in that position anyway. They need to deal with their own situation rather than helping them learn how to deal with the situation that they currently have.
Right.
And this is what a nurturing parent does, and what nurturing parenting in number 6 energy does is helps people find their own way rather than dictating to them.
And I think this is probably a good place to take our break. We're going to have a musical guest, and this should be pretty fun. And I wanted to say that we have been dealing with some of the harsher parts of Missoula, and in the second half we're going to be dealing with the potentials, which are very exciting for Missoula. Missoula is a really happening place to be at the beginning of the millennium. So thanks, David, and we'll be back in just a few moments.
Hi, my name is Sumner McCain. I'm going to be doing some instrumental acoustic guitar for you. This first song is called What Appears as Given. This next one I'm going to do, I got to do a little quick tune. It's called Everyone Looks Like a Sailor.
Well, that was great, and I really enjoyed that music, and I hope you did too. And I really would urge anybody who has musical friends or who is a musician themselves to please contact the show. We'd love to have some more local talent on the show. It really adds a lot of energy to the whole production, and we've been really lucky so far with who we've had on, but we could always use new and energetic people on the show for music. So please give us a call if you're interested, and the number for me or anybody on the crew is 406-829-9162. That's 829-9162. And I wanted to give out some more information. Nan Cohen has a beautiful website, www.maxpages.com/light times, and that's with 2 T's. That's www.maxpages.com/light times with 2 T's, and that's where I got the great information about what's going on today and the energy that we have available to really push us on to our evolution, our spiritual evolution. David Trotter can be reached through the Feng Shui Center at 542-7677. That's 542-7677. And he has a couple other addresses here. We have an email address, david.trotter, Trotter, @usa.net. That's david.trotter@usa.net. And he has a website, http://earthwind.safeshopper.com, http://earthwind.safeshopper.com. And I think that's all the business for today. If you missed last week's show, the New Earth magazine is out, and you can get that at the Feng Shui shop. You could get that at Good Foods, and there are a number of other places in town. It's a great resources for metaphysical happenings and articles, so I urge you to go get one of those. And David, we're back talking about the numerology of Missoula, and I just wanted to mention about the astrological birth chart of Missoula. It's a very spiritual chart, a very nurturing chart, and what we were talking about before is things getting out of balance. But I wanted to talk about the high vibration of these energies. It's a Pisces sun, Pisces moon town with a Cancer rising. So we have a lot of Pisces energy, and that sun and moon are conjunct, so we're very concerned with the past and our history and our lineage and family, and because there is so much of an influx of outsiders, the outsiders become as family for each other, which is very interesting. And just this heightened sense of spirituality. Again, dipping into the dark side, it can be substance abuse and victimization. That's the low end of it. The high end of it is the example of Jesus. Seeing that we're all connected. You know, you see that liquidy thing? I mean, it can be alcohol, but it can be seeing how we are all connected, just like the ocean and the earth are connected. There is no separation. And Pisces has an innate knowledge of this. And there's a real drive to be connected with people. You know, the brotherhood, sisterhood idea, where we're all very much family. And that's a really powerful energy in the chart of Missoula. And then there are other parts of the chart which make us as teachers and examples for the rest of the world. And that brings me back to some of what you were talking about. So what's the highest level of connecting that individuality and that altruism?
Well, probably the best way to go is to go to the birth number, which is what we get from combining the March birth month,
Okay.
the number 3 birth month, with the number 8 birth date.
And what is the birth date?
The birth date?
Mm-hmm.
The birth date of Missoula was March 8th, 1883.
Okay.
And that's 3/8/1883, and the 1883 comes down to a 20 or 2. The overall birth number, the 3 and the 8 together, is an 11-2. It's a master number,
Okay.
and the 11 is a master number that's associated with magic,
Okay.
with the yin-yang energy of bringing the dark and the light, bringing opposing forces together, and actually recognizing a little bit of each in the other.
There's a big balance thing going on.
It's a
in Missoula.
balancing thing.
Okay.
The two structure, the opposing forces come together to form a whole that is literally greater than the sum of the parts. And that's what the 11 is about. It also has to do with being extremely sensitive.
Okay.
Sometimes to the point of hypersensitivity. That's the
Right.
dark side of that. But we can be sensitive to each other, sensitive to the needs. It's a number that has to do with tearing down walls and building bridges. Something that we can backlash against sometimes in Missoula. And yet the potential for building bridges and tearing down walls is very strong here, particularly now since we're in the Missoula is in its third major life cycle, which takes that 11-2 energy and takes it to the God level of 20.
Okay.
Which is taking that sensitivity and that doing away with judgment of ourselves and of others and of each other, and doing away with the dualism and bringing it more into the unity of the whole. That's the energy that we as a city are from now until whenever Missoula ceases to exist. So it's something that we should be working with, finding ways to tear down walls, build bridges.
So this isn't necessarily an easy time. We talk about God and master numbers, but getting rid of judgment is no easy feat.
We're taught as a species to judge.
Right. As opposed to discernment, which we need.
Discerning, discerning is knowing what we choose to be involved with, or to not be involved with. But you can do that and say, that's not for me, but it might be okay for somebody else, rather than labeling, well, that's wrong. As example, we were talking about single teenage fathers. There are people who will say, that's wrong. Well, it may not be for you, it may not be something that you understand, but a discernment would say, well, no, that doesn't work for me.
Right.
But I can't speak for that other person. I don't know what their path is.
Right.
And that's a metaphysical truth, that we don't know what another person's path is, what they're about learning.
And we could
go on that forever.
Yeah, and the potential for the availability to judge, and since we're trained, I mean, almost every step you take all day.
Yes.
I mean, so tearing this down is really work.
It is work, but it's over everything we do. Luckily, and built into that number one, that leadership, that individualistic energy, is also the unity ability.
Okay.
Self-assuredness, the high point, self-awareness, and the magic energy, the tearing down walls, brings us into going within ourselves as a city and as individuals within Missoula, this particular city, and seeing what our struggles and our dark points are within ourselves, and how do we do that? How do we, rather than judging it, transform it and turn it into light?
And so we really have the potential here of a heightened potential of being able to imagine ourselves in our brother or sister's shoes.
Yes.
Okay.
It's very strong vibrational energy here.
And that leads to compassion, which,
Compassion is part of that ego number that's in just that ego 9, that hermit knowledge, hermit vibration that is in just the ego of just Missoula by itself, and that is the actual motivating altruistic service element of Missoula, Montana, at the soul level, at the deep true nature level.
I feel, and I've noticed through readings and my encounters with people here, there is the energy of Missoula, which will sort of through the feet, because it's so Piscean, Pisces rules the feet, infuse people to a certain extent, but it's also people of this nature are drawn here. And what I see is a lot of people who in other parts of the country might be considered the canaries. Do you know the canaries that would go down in the coal mines? And as soon as the oxygen level got too low, they would pass out or possibly die. And we seem to have a lot of canaries here that are very sensitive to their surroundings, very sensitive to the energies, and we're the first to notice, and we may not be heard right away. So for all the rest of Montana, we have something to say that needs to be heard.
Indeed we do.
But it's a gift. It really is a gift to know ahead of the consequences what's building. You know, we really have a gift to offer the rest of the country as far as the canary idea that I'm talking about. And do you see that in the numerology as well?
We have that potential, particularly when we come under an 8 vibration. 8 is learning from one's own mistake, whereas the driving energy, that leadership, innovation energy that is so much a part of our inner being as a city, is so strong. It's an innovative leadership. The number 8 energy is an experienced leadership, learning from having been through the ropes, so to speak. And we actually enter into that energy for a month from April 8th through June 7th this year, which gives us the opportunity to look back and say, particularly if we've done the reflection that we need to this month, gives us a chance to look back and say, okay, maybe this hasn't worked so well in the past. Maybe the way we've done wages in this town is creating more poverty than it needs to. We could be solving the cause rather than band-aiding the results of going out and feeding the hungry, sheltering the homeless, when maybe we should be doing something to avoid those situations in the first place. Or we can maybe learn to communicate with each other better, because the constant fighting and grabbing for ownership has not served us well.
Right, so we can learn
It's
from that and
divided us.
change it.
Yes.
And also, as far as the cycle goes, when people are poorly paid, they can't shop at all the nice shops in town, and they end up going out of business.
Yes.
The cycle isn't completed. Henry Ford, I'm originally from Michigan, Henry Ford, one of his basic things about running the car company is that people had to be paid well enough to buy the cars,
Right.
or it wouldn't work. And he had other flaws and everything, but I really liked that concept. It made holistic sense to me.
Yes.
And do you think that with the numbers of this year that we're going to start getting this?
With the four itself, the building structuring foundation doesn't necessarily give us that outright, although we need to build firm foundations for what we do, because whatever foundation we build right now this year is going to determine where we are in the next several years. We do have that number 6 vibration I mentioned in the second 3 months from July 8th through October to work on the nurturing aspects of being a parent, of learning how to let each other go, let the people who perhaps practice different sexual lifestyles than we do practice their own lifestyles, and we may not have any use for that, but we can't live another person's life,
Right.
and we can't be deciding as a city how people should or should not live that way.
So
we
the
have
potential there is for tolerance.
for tolerance,
And
yes.
can we turn that nurturing into self-nurturing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You cannot nurture somebody else if you don't take care of yourself, if you don't love yourself first.
Right.
So we need to look at ourselves and say, okay, Missoula, let's look at, first of all, what we have accomplished and build on that. That's very much the power of the vibration that's coming in and through most of April on into through the first week of May.
Okay.
That number 8 vibration. April on through the first week of May is a good time to do that and say, this is what we've accomplished. Okay, this is how can we extrapolate that out over the next 6 months, a year, to go even further.
And May is a really key month astrologically as well. We're talking about a real possibility to change the Taurian energy. And Taurian energy has to do with how we approach the planet, how we approach our resources, the original resource being the body, of course. And it's rather difficult to imagine us healing the planet without us working on ourselves first, because there's, as above, so below,
Yes.
the inner and the outer reflecting each other. And the Taurian energy, when the Taurian energy is out of balance, when it's injured, it grasps, it thinks that there's scarcity, it needs a lot of physical structure, a lot of physical goodies to keep itself satisfied, because there's this hole, there's this emotional hole, this emotional injury, that it's possibly a societal thing. It may be the whole society is injured in this way. So anyway, May is the opportunity to change how we operate with the physical. And is that also happening?
Well, what happens on the 8th of May is we move back into a very strong hermetic, altruistic energy again for a month. And it's also an energy that allows us to tie up loose ends before we move on to the next 11-month cycle. Because of the way the new year happens, we have a couple extra months in there. It's not just a 9-month cycle. We go into another 11-month cycle. May gives us a chance to tie up the old ways, get things that don't serve any more purpose out of the way. It also gives us a chance to refocus on how do we serve each other without dictating to each other, without being selfish about it.
Okay, so we're just at the end of our hour. It's been great having you here. I did want to ask you one other thing. Since we're at this end of the cycle and the end of creating a structure, what would you like to see Missoula do to birth itself into the new cycle?
I'd like to see us work at tearing down the walls.
Okay.
Specifically looking at what our opposition has to offer us. I work in a great deal of the very liberal social activism, and even within my own camps I notice people who are not willing to talk or to listen to some of the opposition at times, and we need to bridge that from both directions. That could happen particularly within the City Hall, because that's where it's most emphasized.
Oh, okay. So we covered a lot and not even near the beginning of all of these topics. Thank you so much for being here, David. It was wonderful. And I wanted to give out a couple numbers for Nan's website, www.maxpages.com/light times with 2 T's. For David, you can contact him at the Feng Shui Center at 543-7677. And I said that incorrectly at the half hour, so I'm correcting it. 543-7677. Also, your email address, david.trotter, Trotter, @usa.net. And your website, http://earthwind.safeshopper.com. Thank you so much for being here, and have a wonderful week.